to help Ferrari during the races. So we have two main tasks here. One is a fuel analysis. We call this analysis also a drug check or a doping check, because it's mainly of a compliance thing, and if the fuel is still of the same quality we have delivered. So if you want to use a fuel in a Formula 1 race, you need an approval from the FIA first. So which means if we produce a fuel for Ferrari in Hamburg, first thing we have to send a sample to the FIA, and they will check a lot of things like octane numbers, density, chemical composition, and so on and so on. And all these properties has to be within the regulations of the Formula 1. So if everything is okay, the FIA will say, yeah, okay, you are allowed to use this in a Formula 1 race, but you are not allowed to change this anymore. So then, final step from the FIA, they will do a so-called fingerprint analysis. So they will make a fingerprint of the fuel, which is unique to this fuel, same as your fingerprint is unique to you. And that's exactly the same analysis we are performing here. What we are doing here, we are just taking a small amount of sample, and a really small amount of this sample is going into this machine. That's with the sewage we inject about 0.1 microliter, which is 10,000th of a milliliter, into this machine. And within the machine we have a column, and in this column the fuel, all the different chemical components of the fuels are separated. So for example, if we have a normal road fuel, there are up to 200 different components. So we separate them all, and so then we are getting this so-called fingerprint of the fuel. So maybe I can show you on the screen here. And just go in here so that you all can see something. So this is a chromatogram, we call it, and that's a so-called fingerprint. So what you can see here, a lot of peaks, we name it. So and every time you see a peak here, that's a different chemical component of the fuel. So you see all these are different components. In our lab we could also identify all of them. For example, we can say this one here is ethanol, and then we can see the size of this peak, the area of this peak, and can also say how much of this component is. So finally we have the whole formulation of the fuel. You can say 5% ethanol, 10% toluene, 12%, whatever, so that we know exactly what is containing in this fuel. Here at the racetrack we don't do this, we just compare the fuel with the reference. So as I mentioned before, we had to send a sample to the FIA. We take a sample at the same time, and this is a reference fuel. And now during a Formula 1 race or during the week, we're taking samples out of the Ferrari car, out of the tank, and then performing exactly the same analysis. And then it should be 100% the same as the reference fuel. And that's what we have done here. You can see these are two different fuels. So if you zoom in, you can see the difference. But you have to go really into where you can see, okay, these are two different fuels. One is a red line, one is a blue line. The blue line is the reference sample, the approved sample, and the blue one is the sample taken out of the car. So, but you can see here, all the peaks are at the same place. They all have the same size, which means all the components that are the same components and also in the same quantity, which means this fuel is 100% the same as the approved sample, and so it's okay. If you see, for example, this component, this peak, that is about, let's say, 0.1% of the total amount of fuel. If we would have an additional peak like this in this area, we would see immediately there's something in addition in this fuel. So, and if the FIA would see this after the race, so after the race they will check for sure the winner car, they will take a sample out of the tank, and they find out something like this, they will immediately say, okay, there's an additional component in your fuel. Maybe you have added something, a performance component or so, and then they would say, okay, that's not allowed, so you are disqualified. So that's one reason why we are performing this test during the race week, about 30 times. We always take samples out of the tanks, out of the drums and so on to be always sure that the fuel is of the right quality. So we don't want to cheat or add something, but it could always happen that you have a contamination. So we want to avoid this. Second point is also even small quantities of contamination of other components could have a big impact on the performance of the Ferrari race car, because it's extremely mapped and directly designed for this fuel and this engine. So if you just have maybe 1% of other material, that has already a big impact on the performance of the car. Okay, that's it for the fuel. Any questions? So?
Later.
Later, okay, good.